So now let's look at the accommodation and the pupillary reflexes. So we are going to first look at the connections involved. So to start with, we looked at some of these nerves, so they are familiar. That's the oculomotor, which we call the cranial nerve theory. Then we looked at the optic nerve, which was coming from the retina. That's cranial nerve 2. So they are not new to you. We are going to look at a few new things. We have our eye here, and we are seeing different connections, as we can see. So in the accommodation, the pupillary reflex, we have what you need to know is that we shall have a part which will supply us with the parasympathetic, and then we shall have another which will provide the sympathetic supply or innervation. So the easier one is the sympathetic. So the sympathetic will just come from, if you can see here, I've done something. It will come from the upper thoracic segment of the spinal cord. That will be the source of the sympathetic innervation of our eye. And we say that the sympathetic will be for, if you remember, we say that it will be for dilating the pupil, whereas the parasympathetic will be for constricting the pupil. So the sympathetic is from the upper thoracic segment of the spinal cord. Then me actually indicate it here that this is sympathetic innervation. Then if you have to look at the parasympathetic, we have to consider the efferent and the afferent. Afferent is what delivers information from the sensory organ to the brain region, which will be involved in the integration of the information, whereas the efferent will carry the information from the brain back to the sensory organ. So this has two components. We have the afferent, which will be provided by the optic nerve. For example, if too much light has entered your eye, it will be carried, that information will be carried by the optic nerve to the brain, in telling it that, you know what, there is so much light coming in, and someone has to deliver back the information, which involves now the control, that now do this to the pupil. That's what we call the efferent division. A comes before E, so you can remember that afferent is from sensory to brain, then efferent is from brain to the sensory organ. So the optic nerve will give us the afferent division, will give us the, let me erase this, optic nerve will be for the afferent transfer of information. So that's the optic nerve. We are seeing it coming from the eye and moving to the brain stem. This is the brain stem, and it's going to synapse somewhere in what we call the pretector region. You will see that the pretector nucleus is actually involved in these reflexes. So this is called the pretector region, where we have that nucleus, the pretector nucleus. So meaning information will be handled here in the pretector region, which is in the brainstem. Then from the brainstem, information, that is the efferent information, will be carried by which nerve? By the oculomotor nerve. So this is the oculomotor nerve. Remember I say that oculomotor has two parts. It has the visceral and the parasympathetic. The visceral is what we just saw earlier, the supply to the muscles, whereas the parasympathetic part is this one now. The parasympathetic of the oculomotor nerve, that is cranial nerve 3, is the one involved in the pupillary reflexes. So this information will be carried by the oculomotor nerve, which we are seeing here, to this nucleus here in the brainstem. So what's the name of this nucleus? It's what we call the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. This one here, the one I've labeled. So this is what we call the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. So you can transfer this. That's the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Edinger-Westphal nucleus. Erase this. It's not relevant. So from the pretector region or pretector nucleus, it's carried by the parasympathetic division of oculomotor nerve to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, then continues to this ganglion here, which we see before reaching the eye. So this ganglion, it's what we call the ciliary ganglion. So this is known as the ciliary ganglion. So that's what we call the ciliary ganglion. So information first goes through the ciliary ganglion before reaching the eye, and that's how we have our information eventually reaching the eye. So in the eye, it will supply these muscles that will be involved in the accommodation, the pupillary reflex. We talked about the sphincter of the iris, the sphincter pupillae of the iris, that is in controlling the aperture, and specifically, since we are talking about the parasympathetic, it will be for constricting the pupil, that is reducing its aperture. Then the other one are the ciliary muscles. Remember the introductory part, we say that the ciliary muscles directly influence the tension on the suspensory ligaments. That is, if the ciliary muscle contracts, it would mean that the tension in the suspensory ligaments will reduce. And if it reduces, let me try to do it here so that I bring out the clear explanation. So we have our suspensory ligaments like this. So if tension in these ligaments reduces, it means that the lens will just go back into its convexity. It will increase in the curvature. Yes, it will become more curved. That's if the ciliary muscle contracts, reduce the tension in the suspensory ligaments, and then the lens will become more curved, so that you can have more refraction. Get it? And vice versa. So that's how we have our accommodation and the pupillary reflex in short and summarized.